Bismillahir-Rahman-Rahim. Kitab-ul-Taqdeer, Book of Destiny. By G. A. Parwez. Translated by Khalid M. Said. Chapter 17. Prayer. In this chapter I propose to tackle one of the most delicate and sensitive issues in the domain of religion, viz. Prayer, be it in the form of certain rituals of worship, or the act of making a request to the Almighty. It is a sensitive issue because prayer is directly concerned with human sentiments and emotions, whereas the Quran suggests the use of reason to tackle life's problems. Prayer has been an element of humanity ever since the dawn of history. Universality of prayer. It has been one common characteristic of mankind regardless of time, place, society, philosophy, or the deity involved, or even the rites employed. The incentive for prayer is asking an invisible mighty power for help. Even worship is invariably a prelude to prayer. Sacrificial or other offerings made to a deity are also conditionally accompanied by a request. Prayer is solace for the wronged, support for the weak, hope for the dismayed, shoulder to cry on for the hurt, and the last chance for the hopeless. The more sentimental, devoted and absorbed a prayer feels, the better are the chances considered for the prayer's success. I propose to examine critically such an emotional issue because the Quran bases its teaching on reason and logic. Even metaphysical phenomena like the hereafter 219–200. It guides to the path of Allah. Opening parenthesis. The truth. Those who strive to ponder upon it. 29. The current concept of prayer. The prevalent concept of prayer makes it an activity in which Allah is requested to do, or give, something. But the Arabic term dua means to call out to, beckon, someone. As calling out is often for help, the term has also come to be used for seeking help, asking for, requesting, etc. The Quran often uses the same term for both the currently prevalent but erroneous concept as well as the Quranic version of it, for example, ilah, to mean an idol as well as Allah, and ibadah, for reverential worship as well as practical adoption of Allah's law. Similarly, dua, yado, etc. has been used in the meaning of the idolaters calling out to their gods and goddesses for help, as well as for a Muslim to obey Allah. Dua to mean obedience. Let us first look at instances in the Quran where this particular term and its derivatives have been used to mean obedience to Allah. Surah Al-Mu'min. He, Allah, lives and give life. Say, O Messenger, I have been forbidden to obey those whom you call obey other than Allah. I have been ordered to submit to the Preserver of all worlds. 40. 65–66. Surah Maryam cites Abraham saying to his people, "And I sever connections with those who obey someone other than Allah." 19. 48–49. Surah Mu'min. Your Preserver says to you, "Call me and I will answer you. Those who transgress my obedience shall enter hell, humiliated." 40. 60. Surah Tur mentions residents of paradise answering the query about the deserving the good end by previously. In the worldly life, we used to call, obey, him. The messenger was told, say, I only call, obey, my Preserver and do not have anyone sharing with him. 72. 20. Messenger, in general, beckoned, and don't call, obey, any other god along with Allah. 26. 213. 28. 88. 72. 18. Surah An'am clearly says to the messenger to say to men, After having received such clear guidance, how can I call a God other than Allah? I have been ordered to submit only to the preserver of all worlds. 671. Dua to mean petition. Let us now look at the instances where dua has been used in the Quran to mean calling out to Allah for help, guidance, etc. Before we do that, however, we should look at some of the questions raised by this particular meaning of dua. The belief in an unchangeable predestined life renders dua simply futile. For example, the pre-written destiny of a dying patient cannot be altered by praying dua. Believing that prayer can alter destiny negates the original belief of unchangeable destiny. Furthermore, this projects Allah in a strange way. He first decides something, unchangeable destiny, and then waits for prayer by men to change it. Difficulties also arise with the view that Allah rules by decree, making decisions as events occur. For example, A. right and B. wrong, involved in a lawsuit against one another, both pray to Allah for success. Obviously, only one prayer will be answered. Who is it going to be? What if A had not prayed at all? If we take the view that A's prayer will be answered because he is in the right, which is contrary to our social experience, anyway, then once again, prayer is rendered pointless. Again, one may take the view that, in order to succeed, prayer must be accompanied by proper action. In that case, will B win despite being wrong and A lose despite being right? These problems are compounded further by the traditional interpretation of the famous verse from Surah Baqarah. Quote opening parenthesis. O Messenger. Closing parenthesis. When my people ask you about me, tell them that I am close to them. Whenever a caller calls, I respond with a reply. 2. 186. The problem with this interpretation, as is frequently observed, is that it doesn't hold true in countless cases of oppressed, poor and downtrodden people around the globe. The traditional response to this argument claims that Allah listens to everyone but decides and does what is really good for the petitioner. Therefore, an unanswered prayer is actually a blessing in disguise. This response, apart from being unable to satisfy the wronged, has far-reaching undesirable consequences. The oppressed are asked to accept the state of affairs as Allah's better judgment and take all injustice and unfairness committed against them lying down, silently and happily. Another traditionalist belief is that Allah answers prayers only of His chosen people. Allah listens to His favorites. This has resulted in the proliferation of the so-called intermediaries, forming a link between man and Allah. Countless needy people refer to those exalted men, dead or alive, to forward their requests to Allah, with a recommendation. Divinity of the king. Obviously, this particular belief is a product of the autocratic period of Muslim history. It was to the benefit of the absolute rulers to have the people believe that the king is God's shadow on earth. It was, therefore, natural for the masses to imagine Allah in the same mold as they experienced their earthly rulers. His shadows, complete with His divine court, guards, secretaries, intermediaries, and above all, a whimsical process of decision-making. About the intermediaries, the Quran says, "They are men just like yourselves." 7. 194. About dead agents, whose graves are so very reverentially visited by millions. It says, "They just can't hear you. Even if they do, they cannot respond." 35. 14. Also, they remain ignorant of whatever you say to them. 46. 5. They don't know even about their own resurrection. 16. 21. How can such dead people help the living? How are prayers answered? As to the question how, then, are prayers answered? Let us once again look at verse 2. 186, which says, "When my men ask you of me, tell them I am close to them and respond to everyone who calls me." It goes on, "If you wish an answer from me, you must be convinced of my guidance and obey me." Surah Shura says, "Those get their answers who are convinced and do good, proper and fruitful deeds." 42:26. Surah Momin, "You call me, I'll respond. But those who defy and transgress, they will enter hell, humiliated." 40:60. Surah Araf, while talking about calling out to Allah, says, "He certainly doesn't like the transgressors." 7:55. Those who reject the laws of Allah do not get their prayers answered. 40:50. Conviction, followed by continuous diligence to adopt and implement His laws, is the fundamental requirement for getting prayers answered. In fact, such men work at it constantly round the clock and call out to their preserver, in hope and despair, and keep available for common use what He has given to them. 32:15–16. Surah Al-Imran contains a beautiful account of this concept. I quote here my interpretation of it from my work Mafhum al-Quran. "For those who put their reason to use, there are great signs, in the creation of the universe and the cycle of day and night, of the scope and validity of His laws. It is for those men of reason who constantly keep in view Allah's laws, be they standing, sitting, or lying down. They keep pondering over the creation of the universe. Their research makes them convinced and say, 'O our Preserver, you have created this universe neither in futility nor to destructive purpose. You are too great to have done it so. Grant us the ability to benefit properly from the universe as a result of our scientific research and practical experimentation, and thus save ourselves from destruction.' Nations who do not follow this course of action see their efforts wasted away, and they plunge into a humiliating, miserable existence with help coming from nowhere. It is desirable to harness the forces of nature and use them for the universal sustenance of man, not for his destruction. This can be done only by a people who are firmly convinced of the divine guidance. Therefore, these men of reason also say, 'O our Sustainer, we heard a caller calling us to be convinced of the validity of our Preserver's laws. We responded to his call and became convinced.' Then these convinced men of reason desire in their hearts, and they pray, 'O our Sustainer, please save us from the consequences of errors we make. Make up for our little slips and mistakes of judgment and application. Please give us the eventual end of a prosperous existence. O our Preserver, please keep your promise you have made, through your messengers, divine revelation, of bestowing us with prosperity and success. Please don't let us be humiliated on the doomsday. We are sure you are a keeper of promises.' 189–193. To all this, Allah's reply is the following. Their Preserver then responded to them, 'I have heard your prayers, but you must remember that I don't waste the work of a worker, man or woman, and respond fully to an action.' 194. Prayers of divine messengers answered. Let us now make things even clearer by looking at the situation of the exalted messengers of Allah praying and having their prayers answered. About Noah, it is said that he called out to Allah when his people opposed him vehemently. Allah says, 'So we are the best of those who answer prayers. 37:75. How did he do it? We revealed upon him the way of constructing an ark. 23:27. When Moses was told to free Israelites from the oppressive slavery of the Egyptians, he prayed for divine help in view of the gravity of the commission. Allah answered, O Moses, we hereby grant what you seek. 20:30. Go you and your brother to the Pharaoh with my word. Don't you be lax with it. 20:42. Elsewhere, Allah said, I have answered your prayer. So be steadfast and never follow those who do not know. 10:89. Again, when Moses prayed for his people to be granted bounties of here and the hereafter, he was told it could happen only if they follow the last messenger. Our blessing, although encompassing the entire universe, can be obtained by men if they are convinced of our laws, abide by them and provide sustenance for others. 156–157. Zachariah's prayer for a son was granted right away in principle but materialized only when we cured his wife for her. 21:89–90. It is obvious, therefore, that prayers are answered only when the relevant laws are properly applied. Praying without appropriate action is commented upon in Surah Ar-Ra'd with the allegory of a thirsty person standing inactive on the banks of a river. Such prayers all go wasted. 13:14. Prayer of the oppressed answered. A possible comment on the above can be the intriguing question: does Allah not at all answer prayers of the oppressed? Does anyone? The Quran's reply to this is in the affirmative. Yes, their prayers are answered. Following is how it happens. Look at a leaf from the Muslim history of the early period. Years of consistent hard struggle had resulted in the Muslims' own sovereign rule in the town of Yathrib, Medina. In the meantime, Muslims still trapped in Mecca came under increasing oppression at the hands of the Quraysh, the ruling tribe of non-Muslims. The oppressed Muslims prayed to Allah for their salvation. Allah said to the Muslims in Medina, "What has come upon you that you do not take up arms in Allah's way?" The weak men, women and children call out to us, "O our preserve, take us out of this town of transgressors. Please send some helper and friend for us." 4:75. Clearly, Allah does not help the oppressed directly. The Quranic state answers. He does it indirectly through other men. For the first 13 years of the movement, the Muslims' prayers, under the oppression of the Quraysh in Mecca, were answered by words of advice, consolation and suggestions of remaining steadfast, etc. Allah said, "Who is the one who answers the call to him of the desperate and removes their predicament? He does it when he makes you the inheritors of earth." 27:26. Please remember that this inheritance is a result of their convinced good deeds. 24:55. Elsewhere, about the Muslims the Quran says, "They are the ones who respond to their preserver's beckoning and establish Salah, a comprehensive system of adopting Allah's system, make decisions through mutual consultation, and keep for common use whatever sustenance they have." 42:38. This method of ruling through mutual consultation, established to create and sustain a fair and just social order, is the same employed to salvage the Israelites from the shackles of Egyptian bondage. Surah Qasas. The Pharaoh had carried transgression to extremes. He operated a policy of divide and rule, by oppressing and neutralizing the potentially dangerous while promoting the inept and the weak. Our law of returns demanded to bestow upon the oppressed its bounties, i.e., inheritance of, and power in, the land where they could have their own sovereign government. 28. 4-6. Why pray? Let me ask you to ponder, just for a few seconds, upon the question. Why and when do the oppressed need to pray to Allah? They do so in an unjust, unfair and oppressive society which is oblivious to their predicament, abandons them by neglecting Him completely. They see no other recourse open to them than to plead with the Almighty. Not so in a just society. But this never happens in a fair and just society, simply because they do not need to. Omar's eloquent statement. This fact was so very eloquently illustrated by Omar, the second caliph, when he announced, "I have been entrusted with the responsibility of the caliphate so that I stop your prayers on their way out and not let them reach Allah." That sums up the purpose and target of the Quranic social order. In such a society, no one needs to pray to the Almighty because His representatives on earth are taking care of them. In such a society there are no individual prayers. Muslim prayers are collective. That explains the fact that all the Muslim prayers mentioned in the Quran are collective. A glance at those can make clear their purpose. Some of them are: 1. O Preserver of all worlds! Guide us on the right path, the course of those blessed by you. 1. 5-7. 2. O our Sustainer! Bestow nice things on us here as well as in the hereafter. 2. 201. 3. Our Sustainer! Give us steadiness so that we don't falter. Save us from the consequences of small errors. Give us triumph over the enemy. 3. 146-147. 4. O our Sustainer! Ignore our errors and forgetfulness. Don't let us slip back into ignorance like nations of the past. Give us strength to carry out our responsibilities. Give us triumph over those who oppose your system. 2. 286. 3. 15. 5. O our Preserver! Don't let us go astray now that we are on the right path. Please keep us provided for. 3. 7. 6. O our Sustainer! Keep the promises you have made to us through your messengers. 3. 192-193. 7. Let us be among the doers of good. Transgressors. 7. 47. 8. Let the right decide the conflict between us and our opponents. 7. 89. 9. O Allah! Save us from the oppressors. 10. 85. 10. Prayers to be saved from the punishment in hell. 25. 65. 11. Let our families, wife and children, be the cause of happiness. Let us be the leaders among law-abiders. 25. 74. 12. O our Sustainer! Take us, as well as our brethren gone before us with conviction, under your protective fold. O Allah! Keep our hearts free of malice for our brothers. 59. 10. 13. Opening parenthesis. Muslims praying in heaven too. Complete our light. 66. 8. It is time now to consider the most important question one may ask at this point. Granted that prayers are collective, what do they achieve? This, being a pivotal question, needs careful consideration. Human action springs from desire. Desire, and the subsequent will, directly influence an action and its performance. What prayer achieves? It prepares one psychologically for the forthcoming action. The verbalization of desire is prayer. As Iqbal very aptly put it in one of his poems for children. My desire is on my lips as prayer. Be my life as a candle fairer. Psychological change. Psychological change in a person, and for that matter, in a nation, has far-reaching effects. One can only wonder at the linguistic depth the pre-Islamic Arabic had reached. The simple nomads of the Jahiliyyah ignorance period used to milk their animals but not quite, leaving a little in there to induce down more. That little amount of milk left was called ad-da'iyah, the caller, the prayer. This illustrates prayer in the human context, i.e., the condition which spurs emotions into action for subsequent performance. Expression of one's desire is prayer. It is important to consider two fundamental points regarding desire. First, the nature of desire. The Quran suggests the standard of a Muslim's desire as, "And don't desire but what Allah wants." 81:29. i.e., abide by His laws and follow His system. As mentioned earlier, the sole purpose of human endeavor is to develop one's personality. Keep your desires in line with Allah's will. The standard to measure this development is to see how much of Allah-ness is reflected in one's personality. Of course, one kind of divine attributes are beyond humans, e.g., eternity and immortality. But humans can develop in themselves the godly attributes of benevolence, sustenance, kindness, etc. This depends upon having a desire to develop such attributes. So, men should desire what Allah wants them to, which can be found in His revelation, the Quran, without which man, instead of praying for good, prays for bad, in his haste. 17:11. Second, the objective of a desire must always be kept in view. What is remembering Allah? The Quran says the convinced keep in view Allah's laws standing, sitting, and lying. 3:191. Again, in Surah Hamim. Those who say, Allah is our preserver, and then stand firm, they have angels descending upon them to console and comfort them with their support here and in the hereafter, and give them glad tidings of paradise promised to them. There, in paradise, you will get what you wish and will happen what you pray for. 41:30-31. A Muslim, by definition, does not desire, pray, for anything out of line with Allah's will. That, therefore, guarantees answering of the mu'mineen's, the convinced, prayers. Regarding the help by angels, the Quran has clearly called it psychological satisfaction. 8:10. Resulting in steadfastness. 8:11. Prayer for others. As far as praying for someone else is concerned, it is nothing but the expression of one's good wishes. It acts as moral support for others. One such case in point is the practice of praying for the dead, who of course remain unaffected, which is a solace to the bereaved. Such acts are socially desirable to promote gregariousness. That is why the messenger was told to appreciate and felicitate those who bring in their donations, because your prayer is satisfying for them. 9:103. The Quran reports some individual prayers of divine messengers. Individual prayers of messengers. Job, Ayyub, prayed to Allah in his predicament and He salvaged him. 3:83-84. Jonah, Yunus, called out to Him and his calamity was alleviated. 31:87-88. In the first place, the Quran reports not details as to how such help was given. Secondly, and fundamentally, it is impossible for us to fully comprehend the mechanism of divine revelation and the nature of the Allah-Messenger relationship. Therefore, it is better left at that. The Messenger Muhammad's individual prayer mentioned in the Quran is ideal for everyone. Say, O Preserver, give me knowledge aplenty. 114. Prayer is blessing and denying blessing is denying Allah. A commonly held belief is that rejecting the mechanism of prayers makes one deny the benevolence, Rahmah, traditionally translated as mercy, of Allah, which is denying Allah and His powers. Let us see what Rahmah really is in the Quranic context. For that, we must recall the concept of Tawbah, repentance, mentioned earlier in this book. The ancient Judaic jurisprudence had no place for Tawbah. Every little error had to be punished. The Hindu concept of Karam Yog, reincarnation, held a similar position. The Christians believe in the original sin. Christ went to the cross to absolve man of sins. Anyone believing in the Christ's being the Savior gets salvation. That is the basis of the God is mercy belief. Rahmah. The Quran holds a view different from both of the above. Allah's law of returns contains both justice and clemency, the latter having a concept different from the Christian. The Quranic concept of clemency may be illustrated by the example of a person putting his/her hand in a flame. The burning which results naturally in pain is justice. At the same time, nature has created cure and treatment of burns. That is Allah's clemency, Rahmah. This fact can be useful only to those who know and utilize it. This, in the Quranic sense, is Tawbah, repentance, i.e., efforts to rectify a mistake. This point is aptly illustrated in the figurative story of man's creation. Both man and the devil erred, but whereas man repented and was willing to rectify his error, the devil refused to confess, standing defiant. Nature, Allah, was clement to man but not to the devil. The Quran elaborates it in Surah Az-Zumar. Say, O my messenger, to those who have done wrong to themselves, don't lose hope of Allah's clemency. Verily, He has created means of recovering all falterings. He certainly is the protector and clement. Come back to your preserver and submit to Him before your error bears result, after which no one will be able to come to your aid. 39. 53–55. Elsewhere, it is clarified thus. When they, who are convinced of our laws, come to you, my messenger, say to them, peace be upon you, as your preserver has bound upon himself to be clement, i.e., any one of you who unknowingly falters, then repents and rectifies it, shall find Allah protecting and clement. 6. 54. This is not to be taken as a license to commit wrongs. It says, this is how your preserver shall be clement to you. But if you return to your ways, our system of punishment shall return to you. 17. 8. Tawbah, repentance, therefore, is only for those who are convinced of the natural law of returns. The disbelievers, on the other hand, have been said to be hopeless of divine clemency. Surah Ankabut says, those who reject Allah's law and its principle of returns, are the ones hopeless of my clemency. 29. 23. Elsewhere, the Quran says, that who loses faith in his preserver's clemency, has surely lost his way. 15. 56. Contrary to this, verily, those who are convinced and abandon everything for Allah, and struggle in Allah's way, seek Allah's clemency. Certainly, Allah is protector and clement. 2. 218. Allah's clemency, Rahmah, therefore, is for those who strive. Says the Quran. Even among the convinced, the lethargic, save the invalid, can never be at par with those who strive with their selves and wealth in the way of Allah. He holds the strugglers in a higher status than those who shirk action. The system benefits all but the endeavoring are graded higher than the passive ones, higher status and protection and clemency. Certainly, Allah is protector and clement. 4. 95–96. Finally, consider Surah Al-Araf where Moses prayed for his blessing for Israelites and got this reply. Surely, my clemency encompasses everything. But among men, only those merit it who abide by his laws, work for universal sustenance of mankind, are convinced of the validity of our laws, and follow the illiterate messenger in the future, who they find mentioned in the Torah and the Bible. He will promote good and forbid wrong, allow nice things and disallow bad, break their unnatural yoke of slavery, lighten them by relieving them of slabs. That is the only way to obtain Allah's clemency, covering the entire universe in its benevolent clouds. 7 156–157. Chapter 18. The summary. The universe, and everything in it, was created with its characteristics predetermined and its behavior intrinsically programmed in it by nature. The inanimate, plants and animals. Life, going through its evolutionary phases from the simplest to the most complex, was no different till it reached the human form. Humans. This was different from all previous creation. Surah Mominun. We started creation of man from essence of clay, inanimate matter, gradually taking it to sexual procreation. Thus we made his semen which impregnated the womb and came to stay in the female egg. Then changed the semen into a leech-like from, which later transformed into a meat-like piece. Then arose a skeleton within it which we covered with flesh. Then we made him into a creation of another kind. 23. 12–14. The attribute setting this new creation apart from the rest of the previous was divine energy. And he blew into him from his energy and made for you powers of hearing and sight and thought. 32. 9. This deviation from the hitherto normal was done for a purpose. Then we gave him hearing and sight, guided him onto the path to accept or reject it. 76. 2–3. Elsewhere, we guided him to 2 paths. 90. 10. This testifies to the faculty of choice man enjoys as compared to the rest of the universe. Previously, only Allah had the power of choice. Now, man was created in his image. Man's faculty of freedom of choice is the colorful thread running through the fabric of the universe. Manifestations of freedom of choice. This has been allegorically illustrated in the story of man's creation where man chooses to abide by laws of nature of his own accord. It is creditable to him simple because he could have refused. A forced action, with no alternative, carries no merit. This new, free, creature was told. And he has rendered harnessable for you all whatever there is in the earth and in the skies. 45. 13. The modern age of science and technology is living testimony of this human attribute, i.e. to harness nature. Science functions on the firm basis of the laws of nature being consistent. The Quran refers to these laws as Allah's will. The universe is functioning under His will, laws of nature, and it is called its Taqdeer, destiny. As regards man, his existence has two aspects. 1. Physical existence where he is similar to animals. 2. Human life, where he should follow a code of law referred to as permanent values, given to him through divine revelation and meant to develop his personality. The status of the convinced. Harnessing the forces of nature is a human attribute. Keeping them within the confines of the divine permanent value system is a humane attribute. This causes man's potential capabilities to manifest to incredible heights. The Quran refers to such men as the elevated. 3. 138. This ambition to rise up was the driving force behind the phenomenal success of early Muslims. The selfish and the greedy exploiters of men, alarmed by the situation, got to work against it. They knew it very clearly that it is the Quran which taught them to be the masters of their own fate. Revenge on the Mu'mineen. The Muslims had to be dissuaded from the idea that man can shape his own destiny. Therefore, their adversaries and opponents began, according to a well-thought-out conspiracy, to propagate the age-old belief of Magus of pre-decided destiny of man. To start with, philosophical discussions on freedom of choice were initiated. Later, the concept of predestiny was cloaked in the sacredly religious garb of fabricated tradition of Muhammad. This era saw the appearance of the first ever commentary of the Quran as well as the very first account of history. Both by Tabari. Both the works were based upon oral tradition attributed to the messenger through his companions. Collections of these traditions were compiled into book from around the same time. With the passage of time, the idea of predestiny of man attained the sanctity of a religious dogma and, subsequently, an article of faith. Propagation of predestiny. The idea spread the notion that dominance and subjugation, status, wealth, happiness and tragedy, success and failure, etc., are all directly controlled by Allah. No human effort can alter individual or collective destiny pre-decided by Him. Therefore, one should be content with whatever state one is in. The oppressor, the cruel, the tyrant, the exploiter are all but pawns in the great divine universal plan, and so should not be blamed or complained against. That is actually insolence to Allah Himself. All this development took place during the monarchical period of Muslim history. Very obviously, such concepts are very well suited to the motives and purposes of autocratic rulers. In addition to that, kingship and priesthood always have gone, and still, go hand in hand for their mutual benefit, i.e., to rule the populace. Thus, the religious support for such concepts was readily available. The whole idea was reinforced by the concept of mysticism, which is really based upon indifference to the practical world and being in an eccentric domain of its own. The inactivity thus bred soon took life out of the Muslim nation. They began believing in the non-Quranic, un-Islamic ideology of contentment with their lot. The state of affairs has been there for almost a millennium. Consequently, Muslims, the shapers of the world's destiny, have been reduced to a lethargic, inactive, unscientific-minded group of believers in their pre-decided destiny. The duality. But, tragically, Muslims today are torn between the idea of predestiny and practices to change it. The paradoxical behavior is evident in cases like illness, murder, etc., where all efforts are employed to change the course of events. The psychological dilemma. At the same time, strong belief in predestiny is verbally expressed. Consequently, this split psychology renders people half-hearted and ineffective in their actions. A shaky hand always misses the target. The correct way. The correct way is for the Muslims in particular, and mankind in general, to examine their ideology in the light of the living Book of Allah, the Quran. They should retain what the book condones. All other notions should be discarded. The focal point of the Quran is the law of returns. Every human action bears a result, sooner or later. That makes man responsible for his actions. Otherwise, the entire system of divine guidance is rendered pointless. Furthermore, the idea of predestiny also makes a mockery of our judicial machinery. Why punish a criminal when she only was an instrument in the grand divine plan of things pre-decided at the birth of the universe? The same difficulty arises in the case of morality, too. I hope by now it is quite clear that the traditional notion of man's, or a man's, pre-decided destiny does not hold any ground whatsoever. All human social problems are of their own making. 42:30. And only they themselves can solve them as they are fully capable of and responsible for doing it. An objection. From some quarters, an objection is raised to the idea of man being the master of his own destiny. It is said that this contradicts with the omnipotence of Allah. But this objection is superficial. It would hold good if Allah's authority was restricted by someone other than himself, but not if he does it of his own accord. In fact, it substantiates his potency when he formulates laws with the rule that those laws are unchangeable. 10:64. He has himself restricted his powers. Law in nothing but standing orders. Some present an even flimsier objection in that emphasis on divine laws excludes the person of Allah. The frivolousness of this argument is quite clear. Allah made some laws through issuing orders which stand for all time. By obeying his laws, man is actually obeying Allah. Some object on my use of terms like Allah's law instead of Allah's will or Allah's orders. Instructions. Order and law. True, words are not essential, actions are. But when certain terms tend to alter the real meaning originally intended, words do become important. Terms like order, instructions, etc. give the impression of being changeable, but law comes out as permanent. Furthermore, obeying orders can be mechanical, but following a law is with full awareness and conviction. A law can be tested for its validity by the results it claims to produce. This is exactly what the Quran has done when it says that Kitab, law, and Hikmah, its purpose, are both from Allah. Action and result. Therefore, every action can be seen to be according to the law or otherwise from the result it does or does not bear. One example is the establishment of the prayer system. The Quran claims, surely, Salah is to eradicate the obscene and the forbidden. 29:45. It is common knowledge that it has not done that during all these centuries of Muslim history, except for a brief initial period. My view is that there is something wrong or lacking in the current idea and/or practice of Salah. The Quran's claim is not wrong. We, the Muslims, are. That is but one example. The Quran presents all its laws with their purposes stated. They should be followed with periodic check whether the relevant purposes are being met. The claimed results produced. That, then, is the essential difference between mazhab, religion, and deen, the Quranic system. The former requires mechanical carrying out of orders, rituals, whereas the latter requires following laws with full awareness and responsibility. That, in other words, is taqdeer, destiny, i.e., obeying Allah's law out of choice. Tolui Islam Trust, 25B, Gulberg 2, Lahore, Pakistan. Tolui Islam@gmail.com